you can't do that. That's immediately a legal problem.
Right, so when Craig was with the BBC and so on, he was in a position where he had committed himself to provide this demonstration.
That's right.
But then he subsequently discovered he wasn't allowed to.
Yes.
And so therefore he had to do something that he hoped would sort of do instead in a way, but knew that it wasn't really the real thing. Is that right?
I don't know the answer to that, and I've often wondered. I haven't asked Craig why that happened and how that happened, what was going through his mind at the time, but it's certainly an interesting question as to what caused him to do the false proof. Why did he feel as though he had to do that? Maybe that was his mental solution to providing something and getting himself out of the obligation that he'd set himself up to do. Because he was under a lot of pressure. The whole circus that happened, he had agreed to do it on the basis of one journalistic interview. They brought in a journalist, they brought in a book author, they brought in the BBC with their cameras, they brought in this, that, and the other. So they broke the agreement, and he wasn't able to cope with it. He was thrust onto the stage far too quickly, and it put him into mental difficulties.
But your story is also that even if it had been one person, he wouldn't have felt he was allowed to do the demonstration at that stage because he'd discovered this stuff about the trust and so on.
Right. But the reason that we did that was to collapse the tent. We explicitly went out there and started fighting the circus and made it impossible for them to proceed.
Right,
because we wanted the whole thing to stop.
But your way of fighting it was simply to highlight a legal situation that existed.
Yes.
So really...
it always existed. The legal situation always existed. And he should have known about it. Or he did know about it, but he should have connected the dots and said, these coins can't be moved because they're under the control of the trustee.
And were you looking for an excuse like that to stop this demonstration anyway, and then you just happened to find this useful little piece of information?
Yes, we actually talked an awful lot about what was going on. We were in communication. I was in Australia at the time, so it was actually quite difficult because everybody else was on the other side of the world, and lots of phone calls were going back and forth. What do we do? Look at this problem. How can we resolve this?
And the people that you were working with, how would you describe that group, and how many of them were there, and what was their relationship to Craig?
We were probably about 6 crusty old white men. We were all extremely experienced entrepreneurs and technical people. And we gradually come together over the period, just talking and chatting, and realized that we all had, if you like, the same sense of being part of this history, and the same sense that we should take it seriously and help where we could.
And what was the relationship with Craig? Was he well aware of what you were doing? Were you communicating with him?
He was partially aware. He knew of the existence of us. The intern knew more about it. And I don't think he didn't endorse our activities. In fact, to some extent, he was rather pissed off by it all, especially this business about the Nobel Prize. Somebody proposed him for a Nobel Prize, and I think he kind of conflated the Turing Prize with the Nobel Prize a bit, and that kind of annoyed him. So he does come across and say things like, Ian wanted me to come out, and Ian did this and Ian did that, but
Were you the leader of the group?
Not really. I guess I was to some extent, but there was at least one other very powerful character. Yeah, so Craig, he was somewhat aware of what we were up to, and I think from his perspective he didn't care that much because he was too busy doing other stuff. So afterwards we did get the message that he was very grateful that we helped to bring to conclusion that terrible episode, the circus, the big reveal.
Now that people are happy that Craig is Satoshi, how has your personal relationship with Craig developed since those days?
I think it's good. I treat him as a mate, in the Australian sense. We're all just mates. We share beers when we get a chance. Sometimes we get a dinner, things like that. It's always been sort of pointed out to me by some people that I should be working at nChain, and that kind of takes the shine off a relationship, I guess. But I don't want to work at nChain because I'd just be another small cog in a large machine there. And I've got other things to do, which I think are more important than Bitcoin. But I've always played the practice of trying to be on friendly relationships with everybody. Obviously sides need to be taken at some points in time, but I don't play the troll game. I don't try and make people uncomfortable. In fact, I have friendly relationships with people on the other side. So it's just who I am, I suppose. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Ian. It's been really, really interesting.
Okay.
A very big thank you to Ian Grigg for providing 2 fascinating episodes. And do please take a look at the first one if you've missed it. For the next 4 weeks, my colleague Natalie Mason will be presenting the show, and she'll be pulling together themes from our previous episodes and celebrating some of the amazing work of entrepreneurs and developers in Bitcoin SV. So please join Natalie for that. But from me, Charles Miller, until September, thanks for listening and goodbye.
Data is double-edged. Wield it well and build your place in tomorrow. But trust it blindly and risk watching your progress crumble. Because much of the data we rely upon isn't reliable at all. At nChain, we believe in data, but we put no faith in it. Instead, we build tools that enable enterprises to trust the data upon which they rely. nChain, data without question.